Let me fix my lights. Hold on, let me fix my.
Finally,
Yes.
I am so apologetic for that.
That's okay. I just had to lower my light.
That's okay. We had to switch locations today and it was just a little mix up, but I'm sorry for having you wait so long.
That's okay.
But I'm really excited for tonight.
Me too.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing
Yeah?
pretty good. Yeah, ever
Okay.
since our pre-talk, I'm okay.
Okay. So I just want to let everyone out there just know thank you for joining in to Candid Talks with E. Where we unpack real life situations and just try to normalize the impacts that it has on our mental health. My name is Isa, and today I have with us Bjorn,
Yeah.
and he goes as Queen of Shade on Instagram.
Yes.
So you do your introduction first, and then we'll start off by just telling your story.
Okay. Well, hello. My name is Bjorn. My last name is Dufault. I am known as the Queen of Shade on Instagram.
Yes.
And I have been the reigning Queen of Shade on Instagram for about 5 years. In 2018, I hit 21 million likes on Instagram alone, and my career was born, even though I had been working a long time before that. Now that I've said that, I'm also a recording artist.
Okay.
My music is currently streaming in 53 countries. I am doing pretty well for myself. I'm also a mentor, so I'm doing pretty well for myself. The reason I'm here tonight is because even with all of this glowing, these accolades, and all of these things that I do, I want you guys to know that I am 38 years old as of September 29th, just passed, and I live with bipolar disorder type 1, acute anxiety disorder, and post traumatic stress disorder. So that is the what. Now, this is the why. Okay, so about 50 years ago, my family started in the projects. Under my grandmother's reign and my grandmother's life. Um, my mother was 17 when she had me. My father was 28.
Okay.
Little did I know, my mother had bipolar disorder and schizophrenia.
Okay.
My father also has, I don't know if it's bipolar disorder, but it's something like that. I'm
Okay.
not really in close connection with him. But the reason why I'm telling you this is because we first need to understand that mental health and mental disorders are hereditary,
Yes.
they are passed.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that situation, my mother came together, with my father, and they had me. I am the oldest of four children.
Okay.
And like I said, mental illness is hereditary.
Yeah.
So after that, I want to say in the middle of the 80s, because I was born in 1982. So late 80s, my mother got hooked on drugs.
Okay.
And I mean the hard stuff, everything. And my father, he was no longer in the picture. Because of his illness and where he was, he took his absence. But my mother started using drugs very heavily. And that was the bulk of my early childhood. I remember, the different men coming in and out of the house. I remember seeing her do drugs while I sat in the living room on the floor watching Disney, because she always put on Disney for me while she sat at the table with her friends
Okay.
and did drugs. I also was responsible for my siblings. I have two sisters under me and one brother. So I was a parentified child. I had to make sure all of them were all right. Eventually, as things do, what started as recreational for my mother became an addiction,
Mm-hmm.
and it spiraled out of control. And it got so bad that, things were sold out of the house, the clothes off our back, the shoes off our feet, the food in the refrigerator. We had nothing. And at this time, we did not live with my grandmother. We lived in a separate project.
Okay.
My grandmother, though starting in the projects, managed to go on and matriculate to Temple University. But before she did that, she went back and she got her associate's degree. Then she got her bachelor's degree at Temple. Then she went to something that was called Beaver College and got
Okay.
her master's. So
Oh,
my grandmother, at this time that my life was unraveling with my mother and drug abuse and addiction, my grandmother was coming into her own as a teacher. She became an educator. And what happened is, it's so funny because I've lived a lot of places. And I say this in therapy because I've had therapy myself for the last 12 years. I don't remember many of the numbers to the houses that I lived in
okay.
growing up. But that first number, 763-7255,
Mm-hmm.
that was my grandmother's number.
Mm-hmm.
And that number became my lifeline as
Okay.
a youngster looking out for his sisters and his brothers. I would call my grandmother repeatedly,
Okay.
constantly. And on the way to teach school, she would stop by and drop off huge pots of oatmeal with
Cool.
raisins and milk and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we would eat. And I remember that continued for a long time. I want to just segue here and say my mother has been doing drugs for 25 years. She never kicked the habit. She had a stroke 5 years ago. And because of that stroke, her right side was paralyzed and she was placed into an assisted living facility. And
Okay.
she could not do drugs in that assisted living facility.
Okay.
So therefore, she is clean.
Then. Mm-hmm.
Back to what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
So it became too much for me. I developed a habit. I developed stealing.
Mm-hmm.
I was stealing from school
Mm-hmm.
lunches, lunches to take home to my siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And that went on for a while until the school realized what was going on. And the school called my grandmother because one day I had to be taken out of school and taken to the hospital because all of the food that I stole, I didn't eat any of it myself.
Because you're giving to your brothers and sisters.
Yes, so I
Oh,
was extremely malnourished.
okay.
And when my grandmother got that call and had to go to the hospital, she then said, "This can't continue."
Yeah.
I was the first child that my grandmother took from my mother. It was the 80s, so there was no courts involved. She was the
Yeah.
grandmother. She took me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I lived with her by myself, maybe for about 6 months, 7 months. Then my sister came, my younger sister under me. And then, after she acquired my sister, so she had us both, my mother left the state, I believe, with my two youngest siblings. So my grandmother was not able to procure them immediately.
Okay.
So it was a lot.
That
It was
sounds
a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And if we can put a pin on that before we kind of move on to grandma.
Mhm.
Next I look back when you were living with mom,
Mhm.
what memories, if you can put yourself back into that child mode, so to speak,
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
was going through your mind at that time?
You know, I can actually place myself there very easily.
Mhm.
I felt alone,
Mhm.
extremely alone and overwhelmed because here I was. I didn't know what life was, but I had the responsibility of my siblings. So I knew that, and at least I was smart enough to realize that even when I couldn't help, I could open my mouth
Right.
and ask for help. And that is something that a lot of African American children don't do
Mhm.
because we are taught what goes on in our house
Stays in our house.
stays in our house.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I actually broke that. I have
Okay.
a very, very strong spirit. I always did.
Okay.
So I spoke out to my grandmother. I spoke out to my school. I spoke out to a lot of people. I felt helpless
Mhm. Mhm.
because here I was, and I want to just back up. For the first couple of years of my life, My mother was a glowing example of motherhood.
Yeah.
She cared about us. We were always dressed well. We were always fed. We had haircuts. She did my sister's hair, everything.
Mm-hmm.
She was a good woman,
Mm-hmm.
even though she was young. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the projects, we have our babies young. So,
Mm-hmm.
what happened is the drugs. She even got married. And that's how my two youngest siblings came into the picture.
Okay.
And I'm saying this because I remember the pain on the man's face that she married when he realized she was strung out on drugs. I remember how it tore him apart. I remember the arguments. I remember the loud fighting. I remember him telling her, "You've got to get yourself together. We have a family. You've got to get yourself clean." And I remember her pleading with him not to leave, saying that she would do this, she would do this, she would do this. But as I've said, my mother only has about 5 years clean, and I'm
Okay.
38. You do the math.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely took a lot of toll on yourself and what you're saying. You kind of grow up so young.
Yeah.
Um, do you see the going back to mom having bipolar or your dad, do you see any, I don't know if that's me.
Yeah. Is that you? A little bit of a break up there.
Do
It
you
seems,
see, it's me?
yeah, I hear it.
Let me try to lower it down.
Okay.
I'm not touching anything, I promise.
Technical difficulty.
Do you see any of the, yeah, hold on one second.
Okay. Sounds like it might be your microphone.
Hello. Oh,
Yes. It's
gone.
better.
Okay.
You got it.
I like it. Didn't.
You got it.
So you experiencing life having bipolar, at what age were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed at 19. So
Thank you.
it didn't show. I wasn't one of the early cases. Yeah.
Okay.
I was
And
diagnosed at 19.
what was it that made you kind of go into therapy and or a psychiatric care for them to get that diagnosis from you?
Okay. Well, what happened was my grandmother, like I said, she continued to excel. And eventually she had all of us, all four of us. She moved us to the suburbs.
Okay.
Philadelphia. So it got a little better. It was still hard because she was one income, a teacher's salary. So I remember having to sleep on a floor um,
Mhm.
in a living room in like a little pallet. We all had our own pallets in a two-bedroom apartment in the suburbs to get that education. Um, what happens is I got accepted to four universities. I went on to college.
Nice.
That yes, every college I applied to, I got into, and that was hard. That was a feat because with me, what people don't understand about bipolar is that it is your upbringing, it is your triggers, the things that set you off, the things that make up who you are and how your illness looks. Because bipolar never looks the same for two people; it's
Everyone. Cool.
always different. It was all that was happening in my life that made it as bad as it was. So I went on to college. And what happened was I got to college and I realized I didn't really have money to stay. And I worked so hard to get there.
Mhm.
I didn't even have money for books.
Mhm.
And I remember the stress that that put
Mhm.
me under.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then also being a young gay man at that time, I was brought up in the church, so it was very religious. I was very indoctrinated.
Okay.
So, when I got to college, I sought out others and organizations that geared to Christianity. Only problem is I've been effeminate all my life.
Okay.
So they teased me and they um, bullied me, and I was never really accepted, though I excelled, became gospel choir leader of my university and keynote speaker, and I was well known. Um, the black populace did not accept me. And I remember coming from the suburbs where it was predominantly Caucasian and only specks of black,
Mm-hmm.
going to a university that I chose because there would be more people there that looked like me,
Mm-hmm.
to not be received by those people and bullied and beaten up on. I was already away from home. I was 7 hours away from home. I went into upstate Pennsylvania, a university by the name of Clarion University, and I was there alone. I was alone.
And,
So I was already a fragile personality.
mhm, mhm,
So what happened was the bullying. I tried to pledge a fraternity. The bullying was bad. They were doing it not really, they had no intention of actually allowing me to join the fraternity. It was kind of just an okay for them to beat me, basically, beat
wow.
up on me. Yeah, so, because I was gay.
Yeah.
Couldn't really make it in. They had no intention for me to cross the line.
Yeah.
But so that's what happened. I was alone and I was under a lot of stress and duress. And coming from that kind of background, I couldn't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my first manic episode in the campus.
People don't realize how important it is for stress management because if you take on a lot of stress in your life, if you're already predisposed with something that
Yeah,
you have going on, it kind
yes,
of escalate. And like you said, it put you into an episode or an
yes.
attack, which you've had. But before you start to explain that, can you talk about what it's like living with bipolar?
Okay. Well, like I said, I'm this public figure now,
Mm-hmm.
but I live with bipolar disorder every day.
Mm-hmm.
I have had therapy for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
I love therapy. It has worked for me, but I am not cured. I am not whole. Every day is a day that I have to use my tools that
Correct.
I have learned in therapy
Mm-hmm.
to
Oh.
balance
Mm-hmm.
myself and to, yes, that's the word, to
Mm-hmm.
cope.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that will never go away. And what you need to understand is that it will never go away because you have memories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And your mind, when you're not paying attention, when you're in a quiet place, your mind goes back to all that has happened in your life. So those memories are ever present. And because of that, they will trigger you.
Mm-hmm.
They will trigger you no
That
matter what you do.
subconscious factor that I talk about
Yes.
a lot, that a lot of people don't
Yeah.
kind of key in on, the subconscious, and we're
Yes.
so much we're
Hmm.
so focused on the conscious, but not
Exactly.
understanding how powerful the
Yeah.
subconscious is as well.
Yes.
And like you said, at any given point, whether you
Hmm.
feed it good or bad, at any given point, it comes out,
Yep.
when you least expect it. And it can
Hmm.
come out in forms of anxiety, it can come out in
Hmm.
forms of
I have
fear,
severe.
anger.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Rage.
Yeah,
Rage. Hmm.
yeah,
Frustration. All of those things.
and
And
everyone's different, you
yes,
know,
everyone is different. And then it depends on what you do with your
with
life.
it. Mhm,
You
mhm,
know,
mhm,
I have a very stressful job.
mhm,
I speak and I do these inspirational videos. I have over 20,000 of them. They're available on Instagram and on my website.
okay,
But I speak out of myself,
okay.
like
Does that
leaving.
help you to cope?
Yes,
Yeah, okay,
it was actually my psychiatrist that suggested that I use my talents. I've
okay,
always been good at balance, if you understand,
okay,
and for others, balance for others.
okay,
I have just, and I must admit, it wasn't many years ago that I learned to balance myself,
okay.
but it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah,
I'm good at being the voice of reason,
mhm, mhm,
the voice of inspiration,
mhm,
but as my friend, one of my friends, his name is Victor, he always says, he'll call me and he says, "Friend, I'm checking on you because you're strong." And nobody ever checks on the strong.
That's really key.
Hmm.
No one checks on the strong friend
Hmm.
because they think they have it all together, you
Yeah.
know,
And
and
I
everybody takes from them instead of giving into them.
and I don't. It's a
It's
daily.
good that you brought up though that the stressors that you've dealt with in college, because I've seen that a lot of cases where college is such a important factor in one's life, and but it's also so stressful, you know.
Hmm.
And if you don't
Hmm.
even know that you have these disorders
Hmm.
or illnesses, then it triggers something in you that might spike at the very first time. You had no clue that you had behaviors and traits prior to, but because you didn't get any help or didn't go to therapy to get treatment,
Hmm.
to a psychiatrist, you didn't know you had it, you know,
Hmm.
and that's part reason as to why I'm like grateful for you just kind of explaining your story,
Hmm.
so to speak, because
Hmm.
sometimes people don't even know that they have these disorders. But another portion too is the stigma that is held so high in our communities that we kind of don't want to even get help
Hmm.
if we think we do, or we don't know how to get help, or
Hmm.
the access is not available. So it's so many factors contributing to, one kind of understanding, one, what mental health is and dropping that stigma.
Yes. I was one that did not know I had it.
Yeah,
I never knew what my mother had. I
correct.
never knew what my father had. I didn't grow up with them. I was taken from them to shield me, but I didn't know.
That's what I was asking you, I think, before my audio went crackling. How did
Mhm.
you know to go to the doctor then? You said you were diagnosed at 16?
19, 19.
19. How
Mhm.
did you know what happened or transpired for you to go see a psychiatrist then?
Okay, here we go.
Here we go.
So, like I said, the stresses at college,
Okay.
I couldn't handle them. I'm a very delicate person. I've always been a very fragile personality. I've always been that way.
Okay.
Strong, but fragile at the same time.
Okay.
What happened was I was buckling under this pressure.
Mhm.
I also had a relationship at that time with a man who was not openly gay. And that was a stress. I loved him. He loved me, but he would not. And I could not. And religion. And so all of these things caused me to start to act abnormally.
Okay.
And that was what happened. The, the point of this is this: when I left, the college held kind of think tanks with the Black students, trying to figure out why no one realized I was in trouble, because I had a manic episode for 5 months. No one knew for 5 months that I was sick, because I am naturally a happy go lucky, smiling person.
Let's talk about that manic. What
Mhm.
does that look like? And more importantly, what does that look like for you?
For me, I can actually go through it. Okay, so what did I do? I did things like everything was spur of the moment. I felt like I was flying. I would do extraordinary things. It wasn't like I was doing psychotic things. I
Mhm.
was doing extraordinary things. I just wasn't sleeping.
Mhm.
And then not sleeping
Mm.
would go for months. I didn't sleep for months, literally up. And because I was doing that, my brain, what was already fragile, I was on
Yeah.
constant
Oh.
will. And my thing is, I've always been a creative. I remember at one point towards the end, I was writing out ideas for my life in red pen on white paper and taping them all around the room. But look at this. I had thrown out all my furniture.
Okay.
I
So you're
had
saying.
gotten rid of all my furniture.
Mhm.
That was one of the things that the students said. They went to my advisor of the gospel choir and said, something's wrong. He trashed everything he owns.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's in a room on the mattress. Something's wrong. And those same people that had been jesting with me and, you know, bullying me became concerned,
Okay.
because it was like, okay, see, it was supposed to be a joke. I was supposed to be able to take it. I was
Mhm.
one of the ones that couldn't take it. So
Mhm.
what happened was, towards the end of that first initial manic episode, I started, what was it? Oh, I remember. I ended up in jail.
Okay.
And I remember what I did was I went into a haberdashery for men. And what people don't understand about bipolar disorder is heavy spending is also a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that then.
Mm-hmm.
But just in hindsight, spending is good if you have the money, not if you don't have the money. So just for those listening, have the money and then
First.
spend. So
First.
what happened was I went into a haberdashery and I wrote a bad check.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I have what is called psychotic ideations.
Mm-hmm.
So I lose touch
Mm-hmm.
with
Yeah.
my reality.
Mm-hmm.
In my reality, I was what you see today. I was wealthy. I was this. I was that. I was glamorous.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that at 19, I wasn't really those things. It was all in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into this haberdashery and I picked up very expensive things. And because I've always had the gift of gab, I spoke to the salespeople, the men, and they thought nothing of it. Took my check,
Mm-hmm.
walked out of the store with the bags, walked around the store side, and dumped everything that I bought in the dumpster. That's what saved me from 12 years in jail
Because they received their merchandise
because they realized, okay,
at an issue.
this is not normal behavior. He bought all of these things, but he literally, the store clerks actually said and vouched for me to the magistrate. He walked out of the store, walked to the dumpster, threw all of the clothes in the dumpster, and walked away.
Mm-hmm.
So it was things like that that got me noticed. People started to notice something's wrong.
Okay.
I then ended up on a suicide watch.
Okay.
And what happened was my advisor, the advisor of the gospel choir, she then called my grandmother. And my grandmother was actually teaching class. And she said, "You need to come. Your grandson is in trouble."
Yeah.
And my grandmother literally had to go to her principal. And he overheard the conversation and he said, "Go. He's a beautiful mind, but he's in trouble. Go." So my grandmother drove the 7 hours and they kept me in a holding cell. So they took me out of the jail and they had like these glass holding cells and it had a bed in there. And that's where they kept me until my family arrived. Because one thing about bipolar disorder that many of us know, I walked aimlessly. I couldn't sit still.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was their way of making sure I didn't disappear or walk
Right.
into oblivion. So when my grandmother arrived, I was taken from that cell to the hospital. I was given an analysis, but this was not the mental side of the hospital. This was just checking him out. He's okay. Okay. There's something mentally going on. The doctor came and asked me questions. They had listened to my answers. They left the room. I sat for about an hour and then other people came in. And it was scary. It was scary. But I wasn't like handcuffed or straitjacketed or anything like that. But they said, "Can you come with us?
Mm-hmm.
Will you trust us and come with us?" And because my grandmother and my uncles were present, they
But,
said,
yeah.
trust them, Bjorn, go with them.
Yeah.
They took me to an ambulance and I was placed in the back of the ambulance and taken to a mental health facility where I was given a further analysis by two doctors. And it came back then the diagnosis: you are bipolar type 1, you have post traumatic stress disorder, you have acute anxiety. Now,
Mm-hmm.
go ahead, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to take it around, so finish what you're going to say.
That was it. No, go ahead. There's
So
more.
let's talk about the PTSD.
Yeah.
Where did that stem from, in your opinion?
My childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to also remember, growing up for me, around Caucasians, I was fine.
Mm-hmm.
My own people did not accept me because I'm an effeminate black gay man.
Mm-hmm.
I was bullied very badly. And I mean physically, punched in the face and done all kinds of things to me. I actually chased home from school and bloodied and, all of these things. were actually done to me. So it wasn't easy because, I have men that I am acquainted with now that they're just like, they're not like me. They're more masculine. They have the ability to hide.
Mhm.
And I just never had the ability to hide. Everyone knew. And then you have to understand something. This bullying just didn't happen there. I was part of a family church.
Okay.
So
What?
the church, I was a child. The
Mhm.
church, adults
Mhm.
bullied me
Mhm.
about homosexuality,
Mhm.
and I was a child.
Mhm.
I remember one of my most vivid memories is when a preacher came into town, and I was a young thing, maybe 12, 13. He saw me in the crowd. He came down off the pulpit. He grabbed me and he threw me on the altar. And then he pressed his hand down into my back and said, "You need the masculinity of God because you're too effeminate." My family had to be taken out of the church because they wanted to fight. But he embarrassed me like that.
Did you always know that you wanted to? Did you always know in your mind? So we didn't talk about a subject yet.
Right,
Okay,
right.
so let's talk
I
about
hear it.
that first, and then
It's looming. It's looming.
I
We're
know that
gonna
it
get
was
to.
not yet. So yeah. So go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what you call me, I am a transvestite.
Okay.
I Most transvestites happen to be straight men, Caucasian men most of the time. They like women's clothing, they like to dress, they like to adorn themselves. I'm a transvestite. I
Okay.
am very much an African American man,
Man.
but
Okay.
I am what you call two spirited. My masculinity and my femininity exist in one body.
Okay.
So that's the side of it. So I identify as a gay man.
Okay.
But it's we haven't talked about this.
Okay.
I'm a part of an elite community,
Okay.
the fashion community.
Okay.
Um, After I started to get myself together, I was given the opportunity as a young person at 22 to voyage to Paris, France to model.
Okay.
That was the first place that I learned you have a very androgynous look. It's not the men's clothing that you should be wearing. Your body is petite and you're tall and you're lanky. You need to be wearing women's clothing. So I learned then how to adorn myself. And in the fashion community, it is what it is. They
Yeah.
don't judge
Yeah.
because they're used to
Yeah.
the designers, the models, the photographers, all being gay. So it was like, oh, okay, well, welcome. You're one of us. Do this, wear that.
Mhm.
But a lot of my mania and manic episodes, because I had several. I had
Mhm.
one in Paris that was very, very large as well. And I spent 2 months in a hospital there
Okay.
because,
Were you
yes,
on medication then when you had?
I was prescribed medication. I would take the medication until I felt good or
Okay.
felt okay, like myself, and then I would stop.
Ah. Okay. Okay.
So that's what kept me
Mm.
spiraling.
And it's something a lot of people do. They feel like they're in
Mhm,
a space where they feel
mhm.
okay
I
now. They
take my medication regularly now because I've built this empire and I can't afford to, you know. But even in Paris, I never had a desire to be a woman, if you understand. I have dysphoria. I'm not in the wrong body, you know. I'm giving respect to the transgender community right
and
now.
that's the difference though, right?
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
because
Just to
transgender,
understand better.
yeah, the transgender community, they actually believe that they are in the wrong body or that they need to, that they are actually the opposite sex. This goes
Okay.
for men and women. I'm not the opposite sex. I
Okay.
don't believe that I am the opposite sex. I love me. It's just that this appeals to me.
Okay.
And that's what it is.
Okay. Okay. Now, did you always know at a young age that you were gay, or did that happen later on in life? And
Well, well,
'cause
we
everyone's story is kind of different, and then the beliefs too that one is born that way and one is not. So you tell me your side of the story on that.
Oh, well, this is good. I'm glad that you reminded me about this because, like we said, post traumatic stress was always a thing with me. Stress, stress, stress. I would carry it in my spirit. When I was younger, I would say I knew that I was gay at about probably 5 years old. Unfortunately, later when I was 8, I was molested by a grown man and I was raped by a grown woman. So I had both. So it wasn't a situation where they say, oh, because a man touched you, you're gay. No, no, no. I knew before then that I was gay. Didn't
Okay.
make it easy for me, but I knew.
Okay. And what was that like for you? Like how old and how did you feel like you knew at such a young age?
I have always been attracted to men,
Okay.
always.
Okay.
It's just like I remember in sociology in college, um, people say, "Oh, it's a choice. It's a choice." No, that's religion that says that. Just as a young girl could look at a boy and feel
Mhm.
attraction to him,
Mhm.
it's the same thing. I would look at a boy and notice him, notice the different things about him: his arms, his legs, his feet, his hands, his eyes, his lips. This was a natural occurrence to me.
Okay.
Unfortunately, in the gay community, in the black community, we don't like to um, embrace this because a lot of African Americans say that, oh, it's because of slavery that this was introduced and, this is what happened. No, 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 sweetheart. I believe that I was born this way.
Okay.
Um, I don't have a religion today, though I am very spiritual. I
Okay.
do a lot of work spiritually with I have, like I said, mentees, a lot of spiritual work as well. I am also a shaman.
Okay.
So I use a lot of spiritual, metaphysical practices in what I do.
Okay.
Kind of spooky. But I said all of that to say this. The black community does not want to embrace this.
Mm.
Even with my job, I find that Caucasians support me even more than my African American community. I
Okay.
am bigger in Europe than I am in America. And that's okay. That's
Mhm.
fine.
Mhm.
But what I will not allow anyone to ever say is that this was a choice.
Okay.
I, at one point, had to educate my grandmother because she was a devout Christian.
Mm.
And, so it was hell and Leviticus
Mhm.
and this, that, and the other. And I said to her one day in tears, I looked up at her and I said to her, why would I choose a lifestyle
Mhm.
that would get me eternally separated from love and God?
Mhm.
Send me to a lake of fire, because at this time I was very religious. I know the scriptures. A lake of fire to burn for all eternity.
Mhm.
And not just that, it would get me killed here in my own country.
Mhm.
Why would I choose something like that? And my grandmother looked at me because my voice, this is my voice, my natural voice. When people hear me sing, I am what is called a countertenor. That is an old term. I am
Okay.
a mezzo soprano. I have always had a high voice. Puberty came and left me this beautiful voice that I use to speak and to
Mhm.
sing.
Mhm.
But these things kind of further drove home that I was who I'm supposed to be. My
Okay.
grandmother said, well, you couldn't have chosen your voice. You didn't choose it. Though I was getting beat up for it and you sound like a girl and put some bass in your voice.
Yeah.
I, okay, post-traumatic stress. One time I was sitting in a barber shop and I was with my grandmother and my nephew. My nephew was in the chair. There were other men with their sons in this barber shop. A 5-year-old heard me speaking to the barber who was a friend of mine. The 5-year-old runs over to me, starts punching me in the head and in the face. Now, it did not hurt. He was 5, but it caught me off guard, so I ducked. But a 5-year-old ran over and started punching on me, and he said to me, I don't like your voice. His father did nothing, said nothing,
Mhm.
did not correct him.
Mhm.
It was the barber that said, oh no, you need to get your son because
Mhm.
we don't allow that in here.
Mhm.
But I was always met with very hateful behavior
Yeah.
from people.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of my trigger because it made me not want to be alive,
Yeah.
not want to be here.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just sometimes, this was everywhere I went. I
Yeah.
could not escape this stigma. So then factor in you're gay and you're mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gay and you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. It's definitely like what you said earlier, waking up every day, just making sure that you're doing everything in your power to
Yeah.
be on your meds. One,
Yeah.
because like what you said too, you can't afford to have
Mm,
another episode.
mm,
And not
mm,
to think that when you are taking your meds, that because everything's okay for a while,
mhm,
you forget. It's like being sick and we get better for like 2 seconds. We want to come back
right.
up and go do everything we're supposed to be doing, not knowing we still need to recoup. And
Right. And
um,
that's the thing. I work tirelessly. So I drain my tills. I work until there's nothing left inside of me. Like I give so much. But that's because of all of the hate that I have received in my life. I try to do like balance it with a lot of love. So
okay,
I have to rest. I have to take my medicine. I have to stay on top of these things. I have to, even with quarantine, this pandemic, my therapist calls me every week, and has been doing so since quarantine started. So
okay,
I work my tools every day. Even I want to throw this in there real quick. Like I said, it's never a cure. The other night I was working and I forgot to take my night medicine. I was up all night. And it just like that, you would think all this tools, all this medicine, all this great success. And one night of not taking my medicine, I was up all night. And I said to myself, and I thought to myself, I said, I took my medicine. Why am I not winding down? So the sun is coming up, and I go to take it. And I'm like, okay, well, at least I'm going to take my morning meds. So I go over to my, because I have them all portioned out. So I
okay.
look and I realized, oh, you
Yeah.
got to take your meds.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to stay on myself. My best friend calls me every night. Take your meds, friend. Take your meds
Yeah. That's
every
good.
night.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Before we kind of move on to the other topic, I just want you to touch on anxiety a little bit.
Hmm.
What is that like for you and the feelings that you get and any kind of before we get to the skills, let's talk about the anxiety portion and what
Okay.
kind of triggers your anxiety too.
Confrontation, number one. Confrontation triggers my anxiety. Um, as we were speaking before, I also am very nervous and anxious going into public spaces and crowds
Okay.
because I was always bullied and abused and beaten in front of people on a very embarrassing scale and large scale. So these things trigger my anxiety. Um, Symptoms. I like confrontation is difficult. I have learned how to assert myself via therapy, how to be able to be stern and assert myself. But there are still some times when it's someone that I don't expect to say mean things to me because I trust them and I love them, and they do. I literally feel the tightness in my chest and my knees buckle. I
Okay.
have I have to sit down.
Okay.
It's that serious, and people don't understand that. It's that serious. I feel lightheaded. I feel like I'm going to pass out. It's a very real thing that I live with. So like I said, I'm always anxious
Okay.
because I'm always doing this work. So there's the posting, there's the keeping up with it, there's the responses. I'm one of those people on social media that I answer every single comment left on my page.
Okay.
And so like if you go back and look through my social media, I answer everything. If it's negative, I remove it. So I'm doing my own damage control. I'm creating my own space of positivity.
Okay.
So that takes a lot of work. But what people don't realize is you still have to read the negative comment before you remove it.
Yeah.
So you read it and it gets past, sometimes it gets past your eyes and hits your heart and you're
Yeah.
like, wow,
Yeah.
really? All of that? All of that? Really? So yes, like I said, tightness of chest and shortness of breath and it doesn't it's not a good thing for me because I'm a singer.
Okay.
So, if you know about song and singing, you need to feel completely relaxed to be able to emote your music. I have 3 albums. I've sang my heart out, but I get very nervous when I have to give live performances. I'm able to do them, and I have been able to do them in recent years.